Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast. We're on today. We've got another episode during the international break. I'm delighted to say that South American football expert Tim Vickery joins me. Tim, how you doing? Good to see you.
Yeah, very well. Burning with curiosity. I want to know if the Bees fan attic is still a thing. It still exists.
The Bees fan attic. That might
Yeah,
be before my time.
it is. Yeah, it
Explain.
clearly is. I will explain. Yeah, we're going back to the summer of 1996, and I was back from Brazil for a little while, and I needed some work, and I ended up writing for. It was Team Talk. It was one of those ones where you phoned up for news, right? And this is totally unofficial. So there was no because the clubs had one themselves. This was supposed to be independent from the fans. I had to come up with 3 stories a day about Brentford in 1996 in the close season. I was doing West Ham and I was doing Brentford as well. And West Ham was easy because this was like while Euro 96 was going on and West Ham were buying everyone.
Right.
Brentford, well, I'm not even sure back then that much went on during the season at Brentford. In the close season, when David Webb was on holiday, nothing went on at all. And you've got to come up with 3 stories a day and nothing's happening. So I did lots of stuff about Barry Ashby not being happy with the package put in front of him and so on. So I've got a little bit of trauma, I think, about Brentford from those days back in 1996. But I do remember buying all the local papers and the Bees fan attic was a kind of place where the Brentford supporters congregated on match days.
I'm sure we'll get some comments on that, definitely.
I hope
so. But just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts just around the international break, around the Pontus Janssen episode that we released last week. We've been getting a lot of love on that. So please do keep commenting. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Tim, I'll just get straight into it. The reason, obviously, why we're doing this pod is because I was working the other day at 5 Live and you made an appearance on the Monday Night Club. And they did a little segment on Igor Thiago. Talking about his potential to maybe make an appearance in Carlo Ancelotti's Brazil side. But before we kind of get into that, Brentford fans should know about Thiago's backstory because it is quite interesting. But for the ones who don't, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, although I think there's every chance that you lot might know more about this than I do. Because, and this is part of our story, when he's not well known in Brazil at all. He's much better known, I think, this season to not just to Brentford fans, but to Premier League fans than he is back in Brazil. But it's just, I mean, people like to make a big thing of the backgrounds of Brazilian footballers and how poor they were. All right, yeah, but it's a working class background. It's, what am I going to do to make a living? I'm going to be a bricky's apprentice. I'm going to pack supermarket shelves or hand out leaflets. I'm going to work in the market square hawking stuff. How am I going to get by? And I think originally he wasn't that taken with football. He had a brother who was more into it than he was. But it's one of those things where after the world of work, and you see how relentless and remorseless the world of work is, well, why not? Why not? Let's give this a go. So he has, and you lucky people, you're the beneficiaries.
What have you, before we talk about sort of the kind of Brazil links and whether he could make a squad or not, what have you made of him personally so far in the Premier League? Because there's been a bit of chat about, he scored 8 goals. He's only second to Erling Haaland in terms of goal scorers. I think his game has been getting better week on week. How much have you managed to watch of him, and what have you thought of him so far?
Yeah, and I've seen, and just the fact that he started banging him in off his left foot as well. That's a sign of confidence, isn't it? That really is a sign of confidence. And actually, I have to confess, Brentford, the whole thing has surprised me this year. I thought that, you don't want to be the man who comes in after the man, do you? And it's all downhill from there on in. But it hasn't been that way. And he's a great symbol of that, because the last season was a bit of a setback, wasn't it? All that momentum that he's built up is stolen by injuries, and you're thinking, is he going to come back? And I think the answer to that is a very emphatic yes. So yes, I'm impressed by what I've seen of him. The capacity to put himself about, to lead the line, to make himself available, and he's quite happy to take on shots off his wrong foot, which I think is always a good sign.
I mean, that finish against Man United, I think that's the one you're talking about, off the half volley. That was choice. Really,
Yeah,
really.
I think he got two with his left foot. The other
Yeah.
one was left foot as well.
Mhm.
Which was all right. It's not quite as glamorous, but he had to set his body for it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't an easy one. And if you're making them look easy off your wrong foot, again, that I think is a sign of confidence.
So you mentioned that he's not as big a name in Brazil. Has the Premier League form started to kind of create anything back home?
Oh yes, yeah, a little bit. And I'm sure, and I'm told that he is on the radar screen of Ancelotti.
Right. Okay.
He's one of those players that they're having a look at. And obviously, the fact that you've got Ancelotti and you've got Paul Clement there as well, and well, so much of this battle to be Brazil's centre forward is taking place in the Premier League at the moment. So that they are observing the Premier League, and any Brazilian who's doing well in the Premier League automatically, I think, comes into their considerations. But as I was telling the Monday Night Club people, he could get in. He could. But you really are climbing Everest the hard way to do it the way that he's attempting to do it. Because, yes, he played for a big club in Brazil, and Cruzeiro are a big club. But he got there when they were really going through bad times, and they absolutely imploded with financial problems. And they found themselves in a second division. And that's where he appears. And all of his stuff in Brazil was the second division. And, the second division, it does get attention, but it's not as big as the Championship is in England. Mm-hmm. There's so many big teams in the first division. So, from there to go to Bulgaria and then to Belgium and then to a club which
the Bees.
I never imagined would ever be a Premier League outfit. It's very hard to push your way in, and I love doing the Monday Night Club, and it's always fun. And obviously the people are extremely learned, but if there is a blind spot, it is an inability to see things through the perspective of others. I remember being furious with them last year when they were saying, all of them together collectively, they were saying, well, no one cares about the Club World Cup. And I'm thinking that is so outrageous. You may not care about the Club World Cup. You may be right not to care about the Club World Cup, but let me tell you, it is the biggest thing going over here. There are different perspectives, and if you want to play for Brazil, that's a very, very competitive thing to do. It helps enormously if you can tick both of these boxes, but one is usually essential. That is, you've got to have starred for a big club over here, so you have a constituency. And the other is you got to be doing it for what is seen as a major club in Europe. It's very hard to get in. And if you do get in, outside ticking those two boxes, you got a really hard job staying in. I remember the fellow who went to Middlesbrough, the striker, Alfonso Alves, who he got in, unheard of in Brazil, was banging them in Holland, something like Herenveen. And he got in the Brazil squad from Herenveen and played a Copa America and then went to Middlesbrough. But his presence in the national team squad was just despised, just because he has no constituency in Brazil, and he's not playing for big clubs. So it's seen by many as an affront to the tradition.
Mm-hmm. Is it despised by the media, or is it despised by the fans, or is it both?
Oh, both. Both, yeah. Right. There is a little bit of a generational split on this, because the younger generation have grown up with the Premier League, and so they know it's a big thing. So they know someone who's challenging Haaland to be top scorer in the Premier League is doing exceptionally well. But still, with both media and fans, it's a tough sell. It's a very, very tough sell.
And I wondered about Ancelotti's kind of role in calling up players. You mentioned Paul Clement there, so Premier League players obviously definitely on their radar. But is it a straightforward kind of pick for Ancelotti, or does he have to play to the crowd in terms of the Brazilian FA? Because I remember you talking about something that I thought was interesting in terms of who we can call up, or the reasons for it, or the kind of the Brazilian FA and who they would like for him to call up?
Well, there is always a huge call for players who play in Brazil to be called up. That always plays really, really well. And Ancelotti, he's a master of public relations, really is. He's made a point when he arrived the end of May, right at the end of May, he didn't speak Portuguese. Speaks very good Spanish, obviously, but didn't speak Portuguese. And he said, and he did his first press conference in Spanish, but he said the next one is going to be in Portuguese. And he's doing them all in Portuguese, which is great public relations. And it's a struggle because he has a gift for languages. But when you're in your mid-60s, it's not like learning a language before you're 30. It's a struggle. It's great public relations. Also very politically astute because it means that almost by necessity his answers are short. So he's saying as little as he can, which I think is what he wants to do as well. Another thing that he's doing, which is great PR, is making sure that he is seen at plenty of Brazilian league games. Mm-hmm. So he's showing lots of respect. And he's always asked, in the press conferences, you will be asked, nobody's going to ask about a centre forward who's playing for Brentford. Unless he gets called up, in which case is who is he? Why? But the ones they're going to ask about relentlessly are the ones who play in Brazil. So politically, it works well to call up some of them, especially. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but if we get 26 in the squads as we had last time, then that gives him 3 places at least that he can, so he can call up some domestically based players, and that works well. So that makes things hard for Igor Thiago because it amplifies the amount of players that he's competing with.
And in terms of the players that he's competing with in the Premier League, João Pedro and Richarlison currently ahead of him in the pecking order. What's the Brazilian sentiment towards those two?
Well, Ancelotti is dividing his centre forwards into 2 types. There's the ones who play more as a 10 off the central striker, but can play as a 9 if you want. So they're kind of between 9 and 10. At the moment, the man in possession there is Matheus Cunha, and he is competing with João Pedro. I don't think Igor Thiago gets in that conversation. I think the one that he gets in is the number 9. At the moment, it's Richarlison. At the moment, who might start. We're recording this on the Monday night. They got a game on Tuesday. He's just beaten Senegal at the Emirates on Saturday with, I think, what is his first choice lineup. I think we'll see experiments against Tunisia. Richarlison has played in all of the games under Ancelotti, either starting or off the bench, because he loves him. They work together at Everton. He loves him. But he is, at the moment, the most controversial inclusion because he hasn't been doing it either for club or country in recent times. So he is precarious. The biggest challenger to him at the moment is Igor Jesus of Forest, who was in the last squad. When I said I saw the just disdain and despair on the face of Chris Sutton when I was explaining that Igor Jesus is ahead of Igor Thiago. Why? One scored 8 goals in the Prem. Yeah, we're back to that thing of perspective. Igor Jesus has just joined Forest after winning the Brazilian League, winning South America's Champions League, and putting in the most astonishing performance against Paris Saint-Germain in the Club World Cup. Now that gives him a lot more than Igor Thiago. But again, he hasn't been included in this squad, and he's still finding his feet at Forest. The main challenger, perhaps, is a striker called Pedro, who plays for Flamengo, who went to the last World Cup. You might see him in the Libertadores final, which will be live on the BBC on November the 29th. But he's recovering from a broken arm, so they're trying to rush him back. He's a brilliant finisher, but he doesn't have the mobility and the power, I think, of Igor Thiago. So at the moment, for that 9 target man, penalty area, strong reference, there is still a glimmer of hope. So, you keep banging them in and a chance exists. There's only one more squad to be called up before the World Cup squads are announced, which is March. They haven't announced the opposition yet, but it'll probably be France and Croatia. And it's difficult to see anyone getting in after that. So if you haven't been named in March, unless you're Neymar and you suddenly return to form, it's hard to see how you can, unless there's and this can always happen, there's a big run of injuries. So if he can keep banging them in, and if the competition, and this is the vital thing, I think, because if Richarlison and Igor Jesus perform, they're still ahead of him in the queue. But if they don't, I think there's just a glimmer.
Let's say he's on 15 goals in March, right? And and I'm going to ask you if you see a chance of him getting called up, but if you'd have asked a Brentford fan 10 years ago whether there would even be a chance of us having a Brazilian number 9 at a World Cup, everyone would have told you where to go. But you're saying there could be a chance if he keeps going at his current rate. I
think there's a glimmer. I think it's unlikely, but not impossible. That there's a glimmer. If it was any other Brazilian coach, I don't think it would happen, because it would be almost an impossible sell to their own public. And Ancelotti carries a different type of credibility. It would be seen as unorthodox, unusual. He would have to raise his eyebrow and use all of that charm to sell it, to sell why he was doing it. But it's, with Ancelotti there, I think it's unlikely, but not totally impossible.
As long as there's a chance, Tim. As long as there's a chance. we another Brazilian we've got on our books, Gustavo Nunes, and like Thiago, had a pretty injury-affected first season at Brentford. He's been slowly kind of building his fitness. He's been playing for the B team and playing quite well, I've been told. I wonder how much you could tell us about him from when we signed him from Gremio.
This, I think, is one of those moves that is happening in the shadow of Vinicius Jr. When Real Madrid spent a lot of money on Vinny when he was 16, they had to wait until he was 18 to take him. It just seemed like madness. He hadn't played a senior game, and Real Madrid just threw this money at him. It just seemed like madness. And obviously it's turned out to be a fantastic bargain. And subsequently, clubs they've all been looking for their Vinny Juniors.
Yeah.
They've all been looking. And this is a position, these wingers, that in recent years, Brazil is producing more of them than it knows what to do with. Most of the Vinny Jr. attempts don't come off. There's one of a similar kind of vintage who something might happen with him, but Luis Guilherme at West Ham.
Yeah, we were after Guilherme before West Ham were in, but there were links between him and us as well.
And I saw West Ham the other day were moaning about financial fair play restrictions, saying that they've got this money to spend, but they can't spend it. And I was thinking, well, why did you spend 25 million on somebody who's got one goal? I actually like him and saw him as a promise, but it's almost unfair, to spend that amount of money on someone with one goal and then throw him in and say, well, justify it. Because Vinny's out of the box. Vinny is it doesn't grow on trees. And so I fear that this is another failed attempt at a Vinny. Now, obviously the injuries haven't helped, but certainly in the first team, he's hardly appeared, has he? So they haven't got anything out of him yet. And you always think, this is a long-term investment and so on. But so often, as a result of the move, they lose momentum at this vital time in their career.
Mm-hmm.
Had he stayed, Gremio not having a good season, they're a little bit. I don't mean they're going to flirt with relegation, but he'd be getting games, he'd be getting pressure games, and he would be maturing. And I think that would be far better for him than trying to justify his signing at Brentford. And then at the point that he goes, because I think he's turning 20 in the next few days. Let's say he waits till he's 21. he goes with more of a consolidated career behind him, rather than coming over as just a promise. I mean, there were two of them together. The other one's at Botafogo, Nathan Fernandez. Him and Nunes, they kind of came through together, and they were an interesting pair of impact subs for the last few minutes, but they weren't much else. So thinking there aren't that many who can bridge the gap. On Vinny, and with Vinny, it needed a little while, and the one who can just without any problems at all is Estevan.
Yeah,
but he is that's just a different level of talent altogether. So I worry that there's too many of these leaving too early, and the European clubs want them as early as possible. But I think so often they lose momentum as a result, and it's such a delicate time in their lives to move. An 18-year-old footballer is often very, very young for an 18-year-old, because they're not going out and doing stupid things and bringing traffic bollards home. As we were when we those kind of stupid experiences that you have to go through. You got to go through. They haven't been doing it, and so that they can be really young. And in kind of like a monolingual culture like Brazil, suddenly you're in. And how many nationalities and languages are there in the Brentford dressing room? And wow, what is all this? It's tough on the human being, I think, as well as on the footballer. So I think in a kind of blanket answer, I think so far we're clearly seeing that a significant proportion of these 18-year-old moves don't come off.
Is it? Do you also have to factor in that Brentford rarely miss with these kind of signings as well? Because I know you're saying that sort of there's been a lot of Brazilian wingers coming out and going to big European leagues far too young, but I would have assumed that Brentford would have done a lot of due diligence on this player for a while in terms of the data that they bring in. And I was kind of under the impression from the reading I've done on Nunes, even when we signed him back in the summer of 24, that it was viewed as a bit of a coup for Brentford because there were other clubs keeping tabs on him. Thomas Frank said that they fought a lot of clubs. I don't know if he has to say that because it was kind of a coveted signing, but I wonder what was the reaction what is the reaction in Brazil when a team like Brentford come in for maybe what am I viewing it wrongly? Was he not kind of highly rated in Brazilian spheres as well?
Well, he's seen as a promise, but nothing more. Yeah, nothing more.
Right, okay.
No, he's an impact sub who's done well in a handful of games, and I think he did well in the state championship, but the opposition then is just tiny. On the real stuff, the Brazilian championship and the continental competitions, he was an occasional impact sub who was showing promise. If there are a lot of clubs who are after him, it's because they're all chasing the Vinny effect. When all of the data and so on, I just don't think in this case there's enough comparable data to go on to be sure. On these kind of transfers, they're always a gamble. It's the nature of the beast. But on the time and space that he's getting on the ball, especially coming on second half, is far, far greater than anything he's going to get in the Premier League. So he has to adapt. He has to adapt to that, and there's no data that really tells you how he's going to be able to adapt to that. So maybe this is an example of the weakness of the data model, because I'm not sure how relevant the data that they had on him would be for a player in that position in the Premier League.
It's interesting because obviously the injuries have had a massive impact on his career at Brentford so far. But even when we signed him, there was a lot of kind of fanfare around it. I'm just hoping that he's played a few games for the B team. The injuries have really just kind of killed any momentum. There was a point where he almost got fit again, and then he got a massive setback. And he's still, like you said, I think he came on against Arsenal towards the back end of last season, and I think that was the only time we've actually seen him make a first team appearance. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see when he gets a proper run out, like a proper 20 minutes, to see what he can do. But we shall see, obviously. Tim, do you want to chat a little bit about Spurs? Because we can do if you want.
Yeah, I feel very, very distant now. I'm really distant. I've been away a long time anyway. Yeah. And when you're away, there are certain teams that you feel closer to and others that you feel further away from. When I felt very close to the Pochettino team. And then the subsequent 3 coaching appointments were just so bizarre that you kind of felt mobilized by your antipathy towards them. Mourinho, Conte, and Espirito Santo, fine coaches, but they're not us, and they were entirely wrong for us. And then there was that sense with Postecoglou that it was almost like some kind of wonderful, romantic, bizarre crusade again. That Tottenham should be. That's what the club should be, I think. Although maybe he took it to extremes. At the moment, I just don't know really what to make of it. I mean, looks a little bit like kind of just another football club. I have no antipathy, but I have nothing to mobilise me either. So, and do you think we're in good hands under Thomas Frank? See, what I want to avoid is just mediocrity. I don't mind not winning stuff. It's really not but I do want a kind of romantic challenge.
Well, I've been going on Spurs podcasts at the start of the season, and I even went on one recently, kind of waxing lyrical about Thomas Frank. But it does seem like the previous appointments, they've all been slightly different in their own kind of ways. And was more, like you say, the kind of crusade. Let's play like that's just who we are. That's that famous quote. Yeah. Whereas Thomas Frank I wouldn't say he's as defensively kind of centered as Nuno was. I think he's more pragmatic than all of the managers potentially on that list. But it does seem like, I don't know, it doesn't. I still think, and I did think at the time, that it was a fantastic appointment, and I think he'll get it right given time. However, booze at home against Chelsea is not good. That's not good. No. But I think he deserves time, and I hope he gets some. Personally.
Good. But I just hope it's not mediocre. Let's have glorious failures. I'll sign up for that. But there has to be the glory somewhere.
Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure. That's a good point to round off the podcast. We'll be back this week with a Brighton preview, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts on this pod, on Igor Thiago's chances of making a Brazil squad, on Gustavo Nunes as well. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Eden Road, on Twitter at Eden Road Pod, on Instagram. Tim, an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is mine. Cheers.